you said there's, how many did you say there were scattered around Africa?
There are over 10 million. This is all just in southern Africa.
Yeah, is there, now I imagine they probably succumb to, some of the cataclysms we've heard about, later on, that the beings that were there probably were taken out by these cataclysms. But I noticed I was reading some other things, there were some chambers, seemed like some chambers there that looked as though that they were the holding cells or whatever for probably the creation or the genetic tinkering they were doing there of what we now call the human species.
Yeah, again, that was a very interesting observation that I made, and it takes a while for this stuff to sink in. I tell you, James, you start looking at these circles at first, and you're just amazed at the size and the number and the different shapes, and then the internal structures, and you just it's like a child in a candy store, literally. And then these thousands of sweets and candies that you're looking at, and they all look wonderful and bright, and they all, you want to have them all. And that's what happens when you start looking at these stone structures. And it takes a while. Well, it took me about 3 years to start really identifying and separating the different styles and possible applications of some of these structures to start distinguishing what they were probably used for. Then, once again, I stumbled upon many of the aerial photographs that we have that have these very distinct hexagonal-shaped, clustered structures put together, exactly like looking like a honeycomb in a beehive. And they clustered together, dozens of these hexagonal cells squeezed together without an entrance, without a way to get into some of the circular ones, the central ones, and so forth. You could really only reach the ones on the outer perimeter. And you ask yourself, well, what is that for? And when we found out then that these structures, many of these structures were actually the energy-generating devices using sound frequency and the vibrational energy from planet Earth, and probably what Nikola Tesla rediscovered in recent times together with John Keeley, who also, I believe, made those kind of discoveries. I suddenly realized that, hold on, if they were generating the energy and they were using that energy for their mining operations and for levitation, for crushing, for drilling, for separating the minerals from each other and transporting things, on these thousands and thousands of miles of what we call channels. They look like roads, made out of stone walls from the air. And I realized if this is the case, and they were channeling energy right across this entire southern African continent, it was one giant connected energy grid. Then suddenly those hexagonal cells took on a completely different meaning, because they were also then fed with this energy. And what were they doing in those? Well, if you look at how, ants and bees, plant their larvae and their eggs, what do they hatch out of? All these beautiful hexagonal-shaped pods, or whatever you want to call them. Mm-hmm. So I immediately started thinking about that. Is it possible that this is where the cloning started to happen? And that certainly seems to be the case. I've had that confirmed by several psychics, and in a channeling, or more than one channeling now that I've done with a number of entities. One of them who claims to be Enki himself, who told me, yes, that those hexagonal cell structures were in fact the cloning chambers, or the cloning cells for this new species, the human race, or the Lulu Amelu that they were creating. And it's important to, again, put this into context, because people think about these things maybe sometimes a bit romantically, and there was nothing romantic about this part of human history. There really is nothing romantic about it. And also at this stage, the female species did not exist yet. These are all males that were being cloned. And they were being cloned not into children. They were not being born by birth, by surrogate mothers. They were being cloned en masse into adulthood. If you think about this, if you start thinking pragmatically about it, if you say, okay, well, there was this ancient civilization of advanced beings who were cloning humanoids to work in the gold mines. Let's go through the practical implications here, and how would it have worked? You realize very quickly that, that immediately precludes and excludes infants and toddlers and children.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And when in my channeling I asked, how long did the gestation period take to clone the adults from, fertilization to adulthood when they were taken out and put to work, the answer was the same period as normal gestation, so around 260 days or around there. And that becomes really interesting. So these are all the things that are coming out of the woodwork, and
so they actually from the beginning to a worker, it was only 260 days.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty quick.
That's it. To fully grown human.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned Adam's calendar. That's another thing that has taken us by surprise. When Johann Heine first discovered it, he spent 5 years measuring it and decoding it and aligning it to the solstices and equinoxes, and he made all the major discoveries, only to find out that when I met with Creator Mutwa and I showed him the Adam's Calendar book, he burst into tears. He became absolutely emotional and couldn't speak for quite a while. And he told me that he thought he would never see that sacred site again. And then he proceeded to tell me that he was initiated at Adam's Calendar, which we now know as Enki's calendar.
Mm-hmm.
He was initiated there in 1937 as a young man, and I think he was 16 years old then. And then he proceeded to tell me that it's one of the two most sacred sites on Earth. And he calls Adam's calendar, or Enki's calendar, the place where heaven mated with Mother Earth. It took me another year to figure out what he meant by that, and eventually when the penny dropped for me, once again with the aid of some psychics, and I realized, hold on, this is where this so-called fertilization process took place, that special moment where when they tested this new species that they experimented with, and that new species was actually brought forth by inserting or fertilizing the eggs in some surrogate Anunnaki females. That's what the Sumerian tablets tell us as well. Mm. And this is what happened at Adam's calendar, or Enki's calendar. That is why it's so sacred and so special, because the actual fertilization or the creation of the human race happened there at that moment. Yeah.
That's why I've heard that's where we got the image of the bearded god from. It's from the Anunnaki.
Yeah, I guess that's what it seems to be. That's really, it points in that direction. And
yeah, you always.
Oh,
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, you always wondered who created them, and,
yeah,
and where their history takes them. It's just amazing.
Very interesting, especially the way that they behaved here. How did they come about, and so forth? That'll certainly be some interesting discoveries. I think we're still going to make them at some stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does seem like definitely, we actually, the genes or whatever that we do have, with all these emotions and everything else that came with this body, seems to be their emotions. Like they probably had all kinds of crazy mood swings and everything else. Just they probably aren't these perfected beings that we'd all like to think of them. There's if we are their offspring or their creation, I'm sure they, as they say, we're created in the same image and likeness of the Creator. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And I've got a feeling that as a species, those of us that have embraced spirituality and consciousness have actually surpassed the Anunnaki. Mm-hmm. It's just a suspicion. It's a gut feel that resonates very strongly with me. I believe that a lot of them have problems with tapping into the higher consciousness levels. I don't know why, for some reason, but seems and feels right to me for some reason. But the other important thing to remember, and I had this discussion with someone on another radio show just the other day. They said, well, if they cloned us, they must have been evil and nasty and mean to clone us and put us to work and treat us like slaves and treat us so badly. And, my response to that was, hold on, don't be so quick to judge and act like that, because let's just reverse the roles a little bit. if your kitty cat dies and you're very sad that you've lost your little kitten, you go down to the pet cloning clinic, you have its DNA removed, and you have yourself a new kitten cloned exactly to what you had, a DNA double. Do you think you're committing an evil act? Certainly most people wouldn't think so. They'd be very happy they've got their little kitten back.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Exactly.
And then the person said, well, yeah, but it's just a cat, it's just a kitten, and I'm going to love it and feed it and look after it. Yeah, but you're going to expect it to be obedient to you and stay in your house and not roam and not run off. You're going to expect it to be your cat, your little kitten.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly, if you look at more advanced beings that are creating a new species that, in their opinion, has zero consciousness, zero intelligence, zero knowledge of spirituality or the stuff of the universe, it's pretty much a very primitive creature. And you would look at it like that, and you wouldn't think that you're doing something evil. And you look after them, you make sure that you give them the knowledge of survival, and you teach them the basics by giving them advanced tools and advanced technology so they can work in the gold mines and get the stuff for you that you're looking for. You train them to use all the materials, but you don't think you're doing anything evil. It's a matter of life or death for you. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly, this new creature that you've created evolves slowly but surely over 270,000 years until what you mentioned earlier, the flood, the cataclysm that pretty much destroyed the world, and you put your finger right on it, because I believe it was the flood that wiped out that entire civilization.
Mm-hmm. And there's in the Bible they talk about how the sons of God or whatever found the sons of man to be fair and took them as wives or whatever, and that seems to be the second phase of colonization.
Exactly. That's very much I see that as after the flood. Mm-hmm. But so then you had this pre-flood era, which based on my current research seems to be about 270,000 years, from about 285,000 years till the flood, which is 13,000 years ago. That main thing, that main event that all ancient cultures seem to be referring to in their oral traditions and writings.
Mm-hmm. Now, okay. Well, the word Anunnaki, I guess it same as Nephilim, I guess they both translate basically to those who came from heaven to earth.
Yeah.
And would you say that it's maybe they came from one particular planet? A lot of them tie them into Nibiru, or some people call it Planet X, and there's all these different theories about that.
Yeah. I would see that the Nephilim would probably be something different from the Anunnaki. Uh-huh. I would say that what the Bible calls the Anakim, the Anakim from Anak, the giants, were probably the same beings as the Anunnaki. If you say Anunnaki and Anakim, same thing in my opinion. Mm-hmm. The giants and the gods. And then the Nephilim were it seemed like they were some sort of a hybrid of the Anunnaki who may have been either on Mars, or somewhere else, or maybe, I don't know, they seem to appear out of somewhere, the Nephilim, and the translation, Hebrew translation seems to be those who descended from heaven to earth. Some people translate it as fallen angels, who fell from heaven to earth. And that once again, they give it these romantic religious things, which has got nothing to do with that, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And as you said, those are the days that the Nephilim were on earth, and they saw and the sons of the gods. They saw the daughters of man. They saw they were beautiful, and took them as wives, as many as they wanted.